Hey, welcome back. Another episode looking at some old guns. Today on the bench is a Winchester Model 88 lever action rifle. This particular gun is chambered in 243 Winchester, and this particular rifle is made in 1962. So we're going to talk a bit about the development of the rifle, pre and post 64 changes relative to this Winchester model, and how we evaluate and some of the problems that you run into with either gunsmithing or operating a Model 88. So if we go back to the immediate post-World War II era with Winchester, everybody was starting to bring commercial sales back, and Winchester also was looking to modernize their platforms. All the stuff they had commercially were 1930s designs or earlier, and they wanted something a little different, a little more modern. And if you think about what was going on in the 50s, there was a lot of looking to the future, the kitchen of the future, if you've seen those old newsreel type shows. But, and Winchester is no different. So they had lever action guns. Obviously, the Model 94 was in production. The Model 71 was in production in 348 Winchester. And that was their most powerful lever action rifle in production at that time. So they wanted something a little bit more powerful to use more modern ammunition. And Savage currently had a rifle operating in that time frame in the Model 99. And they were using the 250 Savage, 300 Savage, rimless cartridges in their Model 99 action. So the Winchester design team went to work, and they came up with what became the Model 88. And I've got a little cheat sheet here, so if you see me looking down, for some reason, I can't remember these years. I'm having a senior moment today or something. But the rifle, the Model 88, was introduced in 1955, stayed in production until 1973, which is a pretty decent little run, and some 284,000 of these guns were produced. It was originally offered first year, 1955. It was chambered in 308 Winchester. So a little bit of history on that round. In the late 40s, Frankfurt Arsenal, the government arsenal, Frankfurt Arsenal, was trying to develop a more compact 30 caliber cartridge to replace the 30-06, which had been in use as a service rifle cartridge for many years. And they were working with the 300 Savage as a parent case. They were modifying it and blowing it out and changing the case taper and whatnot. And they developed a cartridge that was termed the T65. And Winchester took notice of that, and they actually said, that looks pretty good, we'll do that. And they actually introduced that cartridge commercially, the E5 version of that cartridge commercially, and called it the 308 Winchester. They did that in 1952. Interestingly enough, the 7.62 by 51, the military version of that cartridge, wasn't introduced or standardized until 2 years later. So Winchester did kind of beat them to the punch a little bit on the 308. So this rifle was introduced in 1955 and 308. They also brought the 308 in the Model 70 bolt action, and then a few years later in the Model 100 semi-auto rifle. And the Model 100 looks a lot like this gun. It's not a lever action, it's a semi-auto, but the stock looks similarly, the ejection port looks similar, the profile looks similar. We've got a Model 100 over at the shop, and we'll do an episode on the 100. Hopefully in the near future. We're doing a firing pin recall work on that and doing some stock repair on that before it's ready for prime time, if you will. But so this gun came out in 55 and 308. As soon as that cartridge came out, as soon as 308 Winchester cartridge came out, people started necking it up, necking it down. A gun rider by the name of Warren Page was having some success in necking that cartridge down to 6mm. And Winchester said, hey, that's a good idea too. And they introduced that one as a 243. And this gun became chambered for 243 Winchester in 1956. A little bit later on, 1963, or let's say the late 50s, early 60s, Winchester was trying to come up with 270 Winchester level performance in this short action lever rifle, and they couldn't quite get it done. And they, interestingly, started playing with that 308 neck down to 7mm, and they weren't getting the ballistics they wanted. So they developed a new case with a rebated rim increased the diameter of that case to close to 300 Win Mag case capacity, and it became the 284 Winchester. And this rifle was chambered for 284 beginning in 1963. Also, they developed basically a 308 necked up to 35 caliber. It became a 358 Winchester, and this gun was available in that caliber from 1956 to 1962. The companion rifle, the semi-auto version of this gun, the Model 100, was chambered in 308, 243, and 284. It was never offered in 358 Winchester. So, interestingly, also this gun this is the rifle version, 22-inch barrel, far more common version of the 284,000 of these guns produced. But Winchester post 64, in fact 68 through 73, made a carbine version of this gun. It was a 19-inch barrel, no checking or any kind of embellishment to the stock. Actually had a metal barrel band right here at the front. So very few of those were produced, less than 30,000. So that's a fairly rare animal in the Model 88. So let's look at the gun. Let's look at some of the features of the gun and kind of what makes it unique. Up until this point, there really wasn't a front locking action in a lever action rifle. Even the Savage 99, which was chambered for 300 Savage, 250 Savage, 22 Savage high power, that type of stuff, and would be chambered in 243 and 308 along the same time this rifle was brought out, is a rear locking action. This one has 3 locking lugs. Let's go ahead and clear it out before we start manipulating it. Get this magazine out of the way. We'll talk about the magazine in just a minute. So I'll hold it right here. So there are 3 locking lugs here in the front of this bolt. And as we close the bolt, if you can see it in that ejection port, you'll actually see the bolt rotate into locked position there as the lever is closed. So in many ways, that's superior to a rear locking action. You don't have the receiver flex, you don't have the bolt compression that you have in a rear locking lug action, which is why the other Winchester lever guns really aren't suitable. There we go. Really aren't suitable for that type of high pressure cartridge. So this was a big step for Winchester, and it proved to be a pretty successful step. Now, not long after that, there are 2 other similar, I guess, front locking lug actions in lever actions that came out. One was done by Sacco in Finland and called the Fenwolf, and then the Browning BLR came out somewhat later on. The BLR is still in production, still being made by Moroku in Japan for Browning, and we have new ones in the store now. But the Winchester was the first, and to be quite honest, it's got a few idiosyncrasies, but it's probably one of the best little handling lever actions that you're going to run into. So some of the interesting things about this rifle, we talked about that. And again, as opposed to the Winchester lever action rifles contemporary to this, all Winchester 88s were drilled and tapped on the top of the receiver for the scope mount. So the other, the Model 94, the 71, all of those, you had to have side mounts. You had to have scopes offset to the side. And Winchester would later modify the 94 to use an angle eject with a weird little top mount on it. But this is mounted very similar to a bolt action rifle. So big steps for Winchester. Was really successful. The Model 88 really took off and was 284,000 guns in what, 19 years, give or take. So pretty good production run on this little rifle. So what are we looking for? Well, problem-wise, most of the problems that you run into with the Model 88 are a result of this magazine. So even from the moment it was introduced, there were some issues with the magazines. They went through 4 different iterations of this magazine in about 2 years of production, and then they finally got it to where it runs fairly well. But the magazines aren't interchangeable. The 243 and the 308 run out of the same magazine. The 284 doesn't run out of that magazine at all, or very, very roughly. The 284, the feed lips had to be cut back, about 225 thousandths in order to get that case to come out of there correctly. And then the 358 because of the larger case neck, had to have some dimensional changes on the inside to allow that to feed. So the magazines can be caliber specific on this gun, and the magazines are no longer in production from Winchester, haven't been for many years. They are being reproduced, and in many cases they're not being produced well. So if you're looking for magazines for your Winchester, you really want them to have this Winchester trademark. The ones that are being reproduced don't. They just have that flat bottom there. It might work. It might be a good magazine. There were some that were actually made by a company called Wiesner's that were on the original factory tooling that was purchased from Winchester, or purchased from USRAC at the time. But other than that, they're made offshore, made overseas, and may or may not run. So one difference, or one thing to note, is that the Model 88 and Model 100 magazines can be used in either rifle. The difference is the Model 100 magazine has a different follower. Instead of this bevel, this is an M88 magazine, it's so marked there, so stamped or cast into that floor plate. M100s will say M100 there. And the difference is, instead of this bevel, it will just be flat and come to an abrupt stop. And the reason for that is the Model 100, the semi-auto, is designed to lock open on the last round. So the 88 is not. So using a Model 100 mag in an 88, when you run the lever back to eject that last round, it's going to lock back, and you'll have to drop the magazine to close the lever. You could reach in and depress, but the ejection port is so narrow, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd have to drop the magazine. Many Model 100 shooters use Model 88 magazines, and the reason for that is in order to drop the magazine with it locked back on a 100, you have to use one hand to hold the bolt back, one hand to drop the magazine, and it's a little cumbersome. So a lot of folks, and in fact the 100 we have in our shop has an 88 magazine in it. A lot of hunters did that specifically to avoid that little issue. So another issue you run into with the M100 is the M88, well, the M100 also. The bases, by the way, interchange. The scope bases interchange between the 88 and the 100. And this is in an old Redfield style base or a Leopold base. They're pretty interchangeable. But Weaver made bases for this gun as well. And the Weaver bases they're two-piece aluminum bases, and they have the large thumb screw to tighten down the rings to the base. And a lot of people install those on the ejection port side of the gun. So there is a front base and a rear base for this, and Weaver at one point actually put front and rear on those bases when you bought the set, and then somebody screwed up and they put the front indicator on the rear base, and they decided, the hell with that, we're just going to not mark them at all. And the difference is where the cross slot is for the rings, and if you mount it incorrectly, you have that thumb screw overhanging this ejection port or partially obscuring the ejection port. And there's not a ton of room on that ejection port, so that could cause the case to actually bounce back in and clog up everything, and then you have to clear that particular problem. So the fix to that is mount the thumb screws on the left side. And we typically do, anytime we have a thumb screw type mount, we mount it opposite of the ejection port, if at all possible, if it's mechanically possible with it. So another issue is reported with the M88 is some difficulty in feeding. A lot of times we find that people have tried to add an additional round in here. They try to stuff that fifth round into the magazine. The 284 is a little fatter, it holds one less. So it holds 3 in the mag, and the 243-308 holds 4 in the mag. If you try to stuff that last one in there, you can get it to fit, and then you have to cram it into the receiver to get it to lock in. And then it's really, really rough because there's so much tension on that top round, it's hard to move that lever back and forth. And you run the risk of bulging this $100 magazine. And you don't want to do that because then it's just not going to feed right. Or you'll have to have somebody that really knows that magazine tweak it for you to make the thing run. So Model 88's in 284 and in 358. Can be a little bit rough to operate with the lever. The 284, sometimes you have to operate that lever pretty aggressively to get that big fat case to feed. out of the magazine lips, even with the magazine lips that were cut back, that 225 thousandths. And the 358 with the wide bullet, wide neck can be a little rough to get in the chamber also. When you do that, when you have a 284, if you have a 284 or 358, what I've found is that if you have the rifle, if you have the rifle straight up and down, when you run the lever, it feeds a lot better than if you have it tipped over or canted, especially if it's canted over to the left. It causes the bullet to not enter the chamber smoothly. That's just my experience with this gun in 284. So other than that, the 88 is a fairly trouble-free gun. Now, having said that, let's take one quick look at this mechanism here. So you see the trigger came down with the lever, and because of that, these guns don't have as crisp a trigger pull as, say, the Model 71 Winchester can. And there's really not a whole lot you can do about it. There have been gunsmiths that work on 88s, that specialize in 88 triggers, and they do some kind of magic to get in there. But as a general rule, shouldn't not take this internal assembly apart. The pins are chamfered on the side, they're directional pins. You have to use slave pins to capture springs internally when you put this rifle back together. It's not for the faint of heart, but it can be done. It's helpful if you have the original or one, a recopy of the field service manual for this gun with some step-by-step instructions. But this safety, the thumb safety on this rifle, is reversible. That's a fairly easy thing to do. So it can be reversed for left-handed shooters. As far as accuracy on the 88 is concerned, they can be a little problematic, and it's the way the gun is put together. The stock on the 88, not the case with the 100, but on the 88, there's a screw right here, and there's a boss on the underside of this barrel, and that's what's holding this rifle together. So you undo that screw, and then this levers up like that. So there have been some gunsmiths that specialize in the 88 that actually install a recoil lug and then bed the action like you would a bolt action rifle, and they can be capable of really good accuracy. But even as they are, especially if you get one that you tailor the ammunition to and you get it to where it's shooting, minute of angle groups are very possible. Minute and a half is probably more realistic. So on the Model 88, collectors recognize, aside from carbine versus rifle, there's the whole 1964 thing that happened with Winchester. So in 1964, Winchester took steps on a lot of their models to lessen production cost. It's a big deal in the Model 94, it's a big deal in the Model 70, and it really caused a lot of bad press for Winchester, I guess, even now, even ever since. But the Model 88 was spared a lot of that. The biggest difference is this stock. This is a pre-64 stock, and you can tell it at a distance. This is hand-cut checkering here and an oil finish on the wood. And on the Model 100, it had the same checkering pattern, same type of wood. In 1964, Winchester changed that. They changed it to a less dense grade of wood, if you will. And this checkering was impressed with heat and a pressure machine and with a basket weave checkering pattern with some decorative scrolls. The Model 100 we have at the shop is a post-64. And as soon as we get that ready for show, you'll be able to look at the two videos and compare the two. Now, where we run into a problem is the stocks will interchange. You can take a pre-64 stock and put it on a post-64 rifle. The serial number charts and year production records exist. The factory records, however, don't. So you're not going to be able to letter an 88 as opposed to just date of reception in the warehouse, that type of stuff. So there's not going to be any information on how the gun shipped from the factory. So you just have to look at the serial number charts, the information that's there, and the features that are on the gun. So there are a couple of other features. This ejection port was lengthened in 1962. The earlier guns, the 50s guns, you can't see that locking lug because it has a longer ejection port. thought process is that they had to make the ejection port longer for the 284 case to clear when that was introduced in '63. So this has the long ejection port. You can see the lug. That's correct for this gun 62. The stock is correct for the gun 62. So we believe this is an all original 1962 gun. So when we talk about evaluating any gun, we always talk about originality, condition, and scarcity, right? So the originality, we're pretty okay with this gun being original. The butt plate's original. We are missing, this gun would have had a front sight hood when it came from the factory. We're missing that. That's fairly common not to have that sight hood anymore, you know, however many years later. Correct magazine, the rear sight is still in its dovetail, folding rear sight, that's correct. So, and condition, it's fairly common to find these guns in high condition, you know, as far as rust or anything like that. So this gun is probably typical condition you find an 88 in. There are some marks in the wood from being handled and being hunted. That's what the guns are for. It's not a safe queen by any stretch of the imagination, but we don't have any surface rust. We don't have any mechanical issues. The bore is great. So that you could take it out and hunt with it today. And then we talk about scarcity. Well, Winchester, pre-64. So that's the good news, but 243 and 308 they produced pretty close. There are more 308s than 243s, but not by much. So the money for this gun is in the 358s and in the pre-64 in 284, because there's only 1 year of those, of around 3,000 guns, maybe 3,000 guns produced prior to the 64 changes in caliber 284 Winchester. So that's kind of the holy grail of the Model 88 world. So after the Gun Control Act of 1968, we'll bring this up as well. After the Gun Control Act of 1968, serial numbers on these guns have got an H added to it. The letter H is in hotel added to it. This gun has a serial number that has an A suffix, so it has a 6-digit serial number followed by the letter A. And there's been at least one internet or blog posting that I don't remember where I saw it. I saw it somewhere where someone opined that A indicated the rifle had been sent back to Winchester for work, some kind of work, typically replacement. And the thought was that Winchester did not replace barrels on these guns. They would replace the barrel and receiver unit, reserialize it with an A. And that's just simple. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever. In fact, there is evidence to support that because 358 Winchester sales, this gun in 358 Winchester sales were really slow because it wasn't marketed very well. Winchester offered dealers the opportunity to send their 358s back and have them rebarreled to 308. So it's kind of contradictory to what this other internet thing said, but you know, that's the story with these older guns. Sometimes you get many stories where it's like asking the ATF a question. Ask any two of them one question, you'll get 3 answers. Oh, that was my outside voice, sorry. But anyway, the Winchester 88, great little lever action rifle. If you can get a hold of one, particularly a collectible one like any of the pre-64 guns, great shooters, capable of decent accuracy, certainly capable of taking your deer, or in 358 Winchester, capable of taking just about anything you want to shoot with it at relatively decent ranges, relatively short ranges. So if you like our content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate all the comments we're getting on some of the other stuff that we've posted. If you have a make or model that you'd like us to talk about, please put that in the comments. You can also visit our website. I think we're going to link to that somewhere on this post. I don't know how to do that, but somebody does. And feel free to visit us. If you're in the greater Houston area, you come by and visit us anyway. We're in Southeast Texas, just north of Houston, in the city of Conroe, not Harris County. No. We're in Deep Red, Montgomery County. So appreciate you coming by, as always, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.